theme song that plays for about 15 seconds. Should be queuing up, and then we should be.
Wake up, everybody, we're sleeping in bed. We're standing on the sidelines, so sinking in. The world has changed so very much than what it used to be. But together we can heal while we build community.
Okay, so what you hear is not a test. All hands on deck at a time like this. Join TRHT, just an abbreviation for truth, racial healing and transformation. Now imagine having a conversation, practice touchstones and using your I statements. Being fully present when it's your turn to listen. Our community is building and healing through resistance. Truth talk.
What's up? What's up? Welcome everyone. This is another Truth Talk. I am your host and co-creator, along with retired Captain Stacy Ledbetter, Ed Genesis, and today we are talking about Sexual Assault Awareness Month, as that is April, for those who didn't know. We are joined by some amazing panelists from the YWCA. This is a joint collaborative effort so we can bring the information to the public to not solve all of the problems, but hope to spark the conversation, to be able to keep the conversation going, moving, and the eventual is to solve. So let me not say that. The eventual is to solve, but we want to raise awareness and information so people can feel protected and safe within their own community as we figure out the symptoms, the nuances, and the different things. I don't know if I should have said symptoms, because I don't know if we won't be discussing what, I don't know. We just gonna go in and we're gonna have a healthy, informative conversation about the awareness and what we can do as a community together. Before I introduce the amazing panelists that we have from the YWCA today, I wanna read the touchstones, which are from TRutH, Racial Healing Transformation Kalamazoo, and they are a way that we sit down and have an agreement, a conversation. So it's be 100% present, extending and presuming welcome. Speak your truth, always by invitation. Listen deeply. Maintain confidentiality. So even though this is a public platform, we don't take the conversations out of its context into other areas and things like that, which I know both of you are experts in your field, so I know you wouldn't, but that's just something that we say. No language of the soul is privilege over any other language of the soul. Value feeling as much as knowing. No fixing, no saving, no advising. Identify assumptions and suspend judgment. Respect and learn from silence. When things get difficult, turn to wonder. Trust the healing process, your own heart and the hearts of others. And with no further ado, we're about to dive straight into this very much needed conversation as we raise awareness. And Oliver, I've been in contact with you, just trying to build this out even before April, after talking with Jakeon from the YWCA. And if you can introduce yourself, and then what role are you here for today?
Yeah, so I'm Oliver Brees. I use they, them pronouns, as we've discussed before. I'm an organizer and trainer for survivors' rights at YWCA Kalamazoo. I'm pretty new to the role, but very passionate about it. I have a degree in gender and women's studies, which is where my passion for this role stems from. Outside of my professional capacity for this conversation, I also have personal relevance as a survivor of sexual assault that brings importance to this conversation in my life.
Thank you. I'm gonna add this in real fast, because so I came in and I explained to them that I was running behind for a meeting, so I don't have any of my jewelry on. So as I'm looking at this dope sweater that Oliver has on with the jewelry and his nose ring, I'm feeling like I'm underdressed right now. And I was like, I'm supposed to have on my pink sweater, my earrings and my nose ring and my necklaces and my bracelets. I'm supposed to be able to rock out. So that's my little my little shade a little bit, but loving it. Just wish I could have got dressed. So we're gonna flip it over to you if you can introduce yourself, please.
Yeah. My name's Lindsay King. I work as a sexual assault advocate at the YWCA. I work on our emergency response team, so mainly providing support to survivors recently after they've been assaulted and connecting them to services. Kalamazoo native. I went to college here, and my degree is in nonprofit leadership. And then similar to Oliver, I also have lived experience as a survivor, so if that can provide any, relation to anyone, I'm happy to share.
Thank you both for being here and having this conversation. I want to let the community know, first of all, disclaimer, we did not have this conversation simply because it's April and it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month. This should be awareness all throughout the year, especially when I found out about Denim Day. And I remember talking with you, Oliver, and I actually missaid it and said, it's something about blue jeans. I said, I learned, and you had to remind me about what that was. Before we even dive in, can we talk about, to me, that set such a tone when I learned about what Denim Day was and the nuances behind that. So if we can start there,
Yeah.
I want to dive in. So y'all listen up to what this is and what prompted it.
Yeah, so this year's Denim Day is going to be next Wednesday. It's, I believe it's always the last Wednesday of April, but this year it's April 26th. The call to action as Denim Day is for people to wear denim, but where this stems from is a court case in which a rape conviction was overturned because the survivor had been wearing blue jeans when the incident occurred, and it was argued in the courts that the perpetrator could not have pulled her jeans off by themselves, and so she must have consented to the act, and therefore it wasn't rape. And the conviction was overturned on those details, or those, that mindset. And so after that conviction was overturned, Denim Day was created to call attention to that case and just the general victim-blaming narrative that happens in society so often.
Thank you for that breakdown. So I shared something with you all offline that I want to dive straight into before even having this conversation. That's about my daughter. Denim Day reminded me of being a father and raising my daughter in the constructs that were toxic and also fell right under a Denim Day thought process. So short skirts, no way. Showing your belly button, no way. And I pushed back so much that a lot of it was hurtful toward her because she's like, well, what am I doing wrong? I get good grades in school. I like to dress pretty sometimes. And I'm like, well, it's not really pretty as much as it is. And I had a mind state that carried that. That mind state and that way of thinking is so close. I just got chills. It is so close to, well, look what she had on after a sexual assault that I had to revisit that with my daughter and have a conversation and explain to her that I was not trying to make her victimize her or make her feel a level of harm that she hadn't even experienced or scare her or any of that. I was carrying some of the things that society had taught me and some of the things that I had participated in to where certain dress codes, well, she had this on or she was wearing that. And when I heard Denim Day, I was like, wow, we have some learning to do because that's a man that said, it had to be a man that would say something like that. And when we think about the things that men say for other people, whether it's age, whether it's gender, it's like, is this kind of your right? And I remember thinking it was my right to set the tone and to have, well, she must be nice because she wears these type of shirts and goes to this type of school, and she must be like this because And that, you can get in a lot of trouble just with that. And I wanted to ask about the Denim Day. I wanted to own my own truths and say that before even diving in, because my first question is, why is this an important topic? And I hope just based off that and knowing how much we don't know of why this is an important topic, but I want to ask the experts, why is this an important topic? I'm going to flip it over to you, Lindsay, before going back over to Oliver, if that's cool.
Sure. So we're talking about, why is this an important topic, sexual assault or the...
Yes.
Okay. Well, I could go on for hours about why that's important. I mean, it just speaks to justice, to people's rights, and autonomy over their own bodies. It's a public health issue. It's a community health issue. Sexual assault affects all ages, races, genders, religions.
I want to ask a question on that. I want to jump in, because I do a lot of advocacy work, and you just hit me with something. So gun violence was just presented as a public health crisis, and there's a lot of people in the room, and boots on the ground, higher up, ARPA dollars, a lot of different things. Why isn't this treated the same? So I just want to interject on that, because when you said public health crisis, and I'm definitely seeing that, and especially I learned some things about how people are unprotected in Kalamazoo County. The numbers were alarming, especially during COVID. Why is this not considered like on a larger scale to where?
I feel that's a hard question, and I feel like it's probably a really complex answer too. Like with all societal issues, it's not a black and white answer, and there's so many levels to it. I think part of it has to do with people's biases, misogyny, since the majority of people who are affected by sexual assault are women. Though anyone can be affected, no matter the gender. I think like harmful ideals stemming from misogyny, patriarchy, I don't know. That's a hard one. No, that's a hard one.
You know, you saying it, and that's what I'm really receiving, because that's what I see when they say things like sex sells. They're talking to men about how to objectify, and this is something I had to learn from being in the entertainment business, because whenever they say quote unquote sex sells, they're not trying to get the Chippendale male person. They're not talking about him. They're talking about literally a woman and some type of way of making it more sensual to sell a beer, a t-shirt, a pencil, a marker, a song. That's directly patriarchy and like the male dominant narrative being the ones that's making some of the things. I feel the same way in rap when I hear a lot of the songs that glorify the drugs, the misogynistic lifestyle, the even harm, and especially murder. And it's like, well, who's sanctioning doing this? And when you do your history check, it's a lot of people that don't look like us necessarily, and a lot of people that's not directly impacted, so it doesn't harm them the same. So that's what just came up for what you just said. I think that's awful, because I learned during COVID, I'm not sure if I shouldn't say her name because of her position, so I won't say her name. I should have asked if I could have said her name. I'll tell you all offline though, because she dope, and she don't mind, and she educated me. But the domestic violence went up during COVID, and hardly nobody talked about it. So we had to have a special Truth Talks simply about that. And that's what actually led to some of this conversation, because I learned about sex trafficking and how women, specifically women of color in Kalamazoo County, feel totally unprotected. And if something happens, it's like, and then they have to go through what I was helping perpetuate, which is, well, did you wear that shirt that had your belly button out? Well, yeah, I did, but I went to the club and still somebody touched me inappropriately.
Right.
And it's like, but were you wearing that shirt? We, and by when I say we, I'm saying a recovering toxic male, I'm in recovery, I'm healing, should not be the ones in position of power to listen to these stories, because there's no way we can comprehend them without our implicit bias, is what I'm learning. So that's what I just heard from you. I think you do know. I think you said it very well, because it's not just black and white, and I agree with that. I believe there's a level of shame as well, and not just from the survivors, but the men willing to admit that you may not whistle, you may not do any of the things that we, when we were young in high school, but there's something that nobody corrected and said, do you know that was not okay?
I love that you said that, because I feel like sexual assault is one of those topics and that's really hard for people to talk about. I think religion also plays a role. Like, it's hard for people to talk about sex. And when you compare it to something like gun violence, in general in society, I feel like people can get behind, like, don't shoot somebody. That seems a little bit more simple. But then you talk about what sexual violence is, and you get into, what it actually is, and you talk about consent and mutuality and all of that, and respect of other people's bodies. And then there's all these other layers. And sometimes it's hard to talk about, because you start talking about, like touching somebody at the club because you might be attracted to them. And learning, there's this dissonance, because learning new things, new levels of things, it might imply that you've done those things. So it's sometimes people just don't want to touch the topic.
Okay, so I appreciate that, because that makes a lot of sense. I was thinking about that with the level of shame, because it's like, do they feel guilty and they don't want to admit that I too was a part of that problem? But I think that's what changes the problem, in my opinion. Oliver, I'm gonna flip it over to you with the same. If we can't have accountability and grow, and it doesn't give me a label to admit that I was, and let me say this, because this is very important. I was raised by primarily women, and still turned around and did said some of the most awful things you can imagine. And it took me to, like, now as I'm mature and looking back and saying, well, where did I learn that from? So I learned a lot of it from society, because I didn't learn it at home. And I didn't learn it by the women who were teaching me. But again, one of the things I learned as a man, recovering toxic male, in healing, is what I thought, well, that's my mama, and that's my auntie, and that's my grandma. You not my mama, you're not my grandmama, you're not my auntie.
Women
That's
perpetuate
somebody's
it too.
mama,
Yeah.
And I don't want to just act like I just made it bad for everybody and I'm just owning all of that. I know when I say society, I'm saying us as society have put out different things that the youth don't know how to process sometimes. And so it does feel like there's a such thing as these people and we other people. Bringing it back to you. We're dealing with that and hearing some of those nuances of, well, not me. Or even if I did, it wasn't that bad. Or I was in high school then. What do you expect? These type of things, they don't help out.
Yeah.
What?
I think it's really easy, especially in a modern, like, cancel culture, to assume that if you admit to, like, having ever violated someone's boundaries that you're going to be like, that's the end all be all, you're never going to be accepted and or like looked at as a productive member of society again. And I think we have to really let go of that, because if you can't be accountable despite the reactions you might get, you're never going to grow.
That's good.
That was dope. That was dope, actually, especially when you lifted up the cancel culture, because there's that level of fear that even before it had a label as cancel culture, people still felt like that they would be othered if they said anything. And so it's better to the other people.
Yeah.
Well, that's them.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting, and that was dope. I'm glad we're having this. Who should know this in the community?
Everyone should know this. I think it's a message that if you don't reach everyone, you're not going to get anywhere with the topic. Like trying to eliminate sexual assault. If you're not touching all parts, all communities, everyone in society, there are going to be people that get missed, and sexual assault is still going to be happening. So if you're not providing education to everyone in every corner of the earth, really, that's a really probably unrealistic goal, but
I don't think so. I don't think so. When we can say things like "We Are the World," and that song is 30 years old plus, but it resonated to where we might not know the lyrics, we might not know who sung in order, but we know that this song exists and that they came together, and we might not even know what the goal was anymore, but the song existed.
yeah.
To me, I think about things like that, and I say society, if they wanted to, because I think about that with police violence, if they want to raise awareness about things and they care because it impacted everyone, then there's ways, because I've seen things pushed in my face growing up to where I just thought. I just bought 5 packs of candy cigarettes yesterday because I haven't seen them since I was little, and I think that it was atrocious that they sold us candy cigarettes when we were young. And when I saw them in the store, I said, wow, they still sell these? And they're you know, a little variation, a little parody box of the bigger cigarettes, which you have to ask yourself, what are you trying to like literally promote? So we live in that type of society to where everything is cool, because as long as you can capitalize off of it, and that's what makes, you know, if you can make money off of it, there's a market. And sometimes we lose the community value. And it's like, well, this is about me and mine. And if it causes you harm, oh, well, I'm just trying to make a buck. And again, I hear that in music. I see it in TV programming and things like that. And it's like, everybody should know this information. But the fact that they can hide it and they can hide themselves, what's one of the ways, Lindsay, that we could start to take? Because I believe that's obtainable. We're starting now. We're having conversations. You said the 26th is awareness. Anything that we can do, you put your blue jeans on, and we, like, it's probably, it's the 20th. That's about 6 days. I would at least like to ask, is there something set up for, like, a photo shoot for the people that do wear denim on that day? Like, is there a place that we can post up and say, this is why we wore our blue jeans on this day? And then that can maybe go viral and be tweeted out or things like that.
I think
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'm hosting an education event on
Yeah.
Denim Day
Yeah.
At Fiddle Leaf Cafe in
Absolutely.
Kalamazoo.
You want to talk about a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, well, you're going to be
Absolutely.
on the panel.
Absolutely.
We're having men from the Kalamazoo community come and talk about their experiences with healthy masculinity and kind of comparing that to toxic masculinity and how those relationships in masculine individuals' lives tie into sexual assault and domestic violence and all of these like violence prevention efforts. Building a healthy relationship with masculinity can really improve that. So we're having a conversation at Fiddle Leaf Cafe on the 26th about
Yes.
that.
Yes. What are some of the ways that people can observe what we'll be talking about on that day?
Yeah, so all genders are welcome to attend, but the discussion portion will be limited to men and masculine identities.
Yes.
And then we'll have panelists in the center kind of taking questions. I'll probably start off the questions, and then we'll have community members give some questions as well. But we'll have some just like light coffee refreshments provided by Fiddle Leaf, and then, yeah, just a good community discussion.
I'm excited about this, and we should think about like the photo shoot, and then for next year, like maybe making something even bigger, and like 100 people at a certain spot, all with denim on. These are the ways that I think about things, because I remember how they impacted me, why I like Mr. T and everything else growing up. It was like because it was pushed in my face like that, and it was like I think I like that. And it's not about necessarily liking it because it appealed to you sometimes. I didn't know what I liked until they showed me 25 times, you know, in a row. I think about that with not making people like this topic. It's not about making them like the topic, but it has to be a part of the conversation where it's like, I know of people that I shared offline that, and this was just one out of so many, that young ladies who go to their mothers and say, your significant other did something to me, and the mothers will not. The mothers will not believe them. And this is a result sometimes as society saying, well, I know when I was growing up, you got fast little girls. You had hard-headed little boys and fast-tailed little girls. She fast. Fast meant she's already sexually promiscuous, and she has no idea what this is. She may be what they consider sassy and can talk back. She may emulate some of the things that she saw and put her hand on her hip. She may think she's older than what she is in her mind, but she's not. And society, men, I'm gonna put this on men again, even though there's a plethora of teachers and taking advantage of, and you just lifted up, Lindsay, that it's not just about women. I'm right now talking about the men making it okay to over-compliment, to touch, to where's my hug today. There's a lot of different things that if that's the norm, that I can violate your space. I can say, hey, sexy, hey, beautiful, hey, you looking good. I can yell all of these things from across the street, and these are the norms. If this conversation is not the norm, then that stays the norm. And I learned about dominant narrative a long time ago, and unless we have what they call a counter narrative, then that stays the same, and it's not safe. And as a father, not to try to stay into that mind state, because I do have a daughter that will check me, but those are the things that scares me. Sometimes it's like, well, I don't think they got it together yet, you know, and I don't want nobody hollering out the window at my daughter. I find offense.
Yeah.
But I also cannot be a hypocrite and say, have you ever yelled out there? And I did. I have. We already talked about our women-only survivors, and I just lifted up some of the teachers that I see on the news.
Right.
But I would be remiss if I didn't say this as a recovering toxic male. I'm saying this, y'all listening. That is a problem that I realize now as a father, and I can look at the news. If you are in certain circles or platforms where it's full of testosterone, and a segment like that comes on, and the woman is attractive, she's a teacher, the young man's a teenager, then it automatically turns into, well, that ain't really like sexual assault. That's like a fantasy for every little teenage boy. And I'm like, I don't know if I wanted my sons getting touched on by an adult and introduced to something as intimate as that? That's another nuance that's not okay, is that little boys are like, well, that's a fantasy for little boys to want to sleep with your teacher. And a predator can play off of that and say, well, surely you want to impress your friends to say that's not okay and that's harmful. And I've met young men who have been introduced to something like that earlier than it should have been, and it has caused problems later on in relationships, self-identity, and some other things. Can we speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, I think there are definitely a lot of like complications that come up for men who are survivors, because the way our society thinks about masculinity doesn't really leave room for you to have been taken advantage of. A man who has been sexually assaulted might be afraid of people judging him or not believing him, because men are expected to be stronger and able to like fend off their the perpetrator, and that's just not how trauma works. Your body can't control how it reacts to trauma in the moment. But there's also just this perception that like men are big and strong and emotionless and very sexual. So it's assumed that if there's a sexual encounter that the man probably wanted it, and that if he didn't, he could have stopped it. And that's just not the case.
That's similar to the Denim Day
Yeah.
ideology of surely you must have wanted it because you're a man.
Yeah, our culture loves to use stereotypes to victim blame.
Wow.
Yeah.
Same question.
Yeah, I think I second everything Oliver said. And I also know people who have been introduced to, or I've talked to men who are now adults, but maybe were introduced too soon, but it was more of like a, oh, this is like, you should want it or something. And then there's a lot of joking and harassment for men who maybe are older and are still classified as a virgin and things like that. Yeah. And all those toxic stereotypes about like you should be strong. Also, I'll just say this, I think men have a lot of shame because of those stereotypes. And I don't have that lived experience, so this is just based on like conversations, research, you know. But there can be a lot of shame with like, oh, well, maybe I wasn't actually assaulted because I'm supposed to want it. Or I can't tell anybody because, you know, I'm supposed to be a strong man, or, you know, things like that. And sometimes the body can have a physiological response to where men might get involuntary erections during an assault and then think that they wanted it. So that, I don't know if that's TMI for this conversation, but that's an important thing to bring up. That can cause shame too.
That's very important because it plays into the ideology of what we think we are supposed to be as men. And when you are physically aroused, like not even mentally, but just your body does, it's science. There's been a level of, what do I do with that? And I remember conversations when I was young, and it was like, what do you do? And once again, I was raised by women. I didn't know how to ask these questions to them. So I would ask people in the streets, and they would say a lot of ridiculous things. And so you got a lot of that as well that plays a part. I want to say with the men part and some of the shame, and again, going back to that, I have to say this as my disclaimer, because this is about to be fourth or fifth time I say toxic masculinity. And I don't want to perpetuate another label, especially on being a black man, because there's just so many things. It's like, oh, well, you don't forget this. But the first time that I heard it, shouts out to my sis, Yolanda Lavender. Some of the things that I was saying in a meeting some years ago, she was like, have you ever heard of toxic masculinity? I had never heard of it. And I was like, I can gather what you're saying, but are you saying that I'm inherently toxic because I'm a man? And she was like, kind of, but not really. You know, there's a construct in America's society, or in the world really, that's like, it's perpetuated by religion, the Constitution. Everywhere you look, there's a hierarchy from man and woman. Then there's this whole gender, and that's why I wanted to lift that up in the beginning, because anybody who knows me, I have So Pretty tattooed on my neck with a rose. I love the jewelry, my bracelets, all of that type of stuff. But I remember being a man and being told by other men, I can't like these things. I can't like pink. I can't like. I'm like, well, I wonder why. Well, like, why not? So it would make me fight. I think I can like it, and I don't think you can whoop me. So unless you can show me I can't like it. I wore my aunt's pearls to school the first time I saw some real pearls, but I also had a pistol on me. This is what got me expelled from school in Gary, Indiana. In my mind, I had to wear the pearls. They were beautiful. They were just beautiful. Absolute. I had to wear them. I just had to have them on. But I did not want to be teased. And so I almost dared people to say something that day. That's a bad place to be, to where you want to express yourself in society, but society has said, well, you're a man, and so you can't like anything pretty, you can't wear pearls, you can't. So you have to come up with a way to fit in. That fitting in comes up with if you have a girlfriend, because now these same people that you rely on for advice or approval a lot of times are saying, you still haven't slept with her yet? She could have been a survivor 5 years prior to y'all dating, but some of the things that we're learned is if she doesn't submit to me, she doesn't rock with me like that. And we're taught to even say things like that, especially the men the predatorial that preys on the virgins. That's the mind state. You don't love me then.
Yeah.
Not you don't love me and marry me. You don't love me enough to give me yourself with no promise of anything else, even though you know that it might end up messed up. And there's the guilt. I watch all of these things, and then I learned about the constructs of rape and how it's more about power than it is about sex. And I was like, wow, I was around a bunch of predators discussing rape. A lot of times, like, yeah, that's what it, to me. And I'm just saying that. I'm not asking y'all, you don't have to agree or anything. I'm saying and that's why I wanted to put the disclaimer that I'm not trying to label men with there's this thing and we're incurable. It's toxic masculinity, it impacts us, infects us all. But unless we have these conversations to know that you probably have sat in a room with somebody who's plotted on somebody and you didn't think it was a plot, you just was like encouraging, like, well, yeah, man, y'all dated 3 months, yeah, she should have. It's not okay. That's somebody's body. And I've been a co-conspirator against somebody's own body. Like, y'all dated how long? Well, yeah, she must not be feeling you like that. Not that she may have went through something, or y'all may not be ready for that, or maybe she's thinking about diseases or anything. It's just flat out, you're not a player. You don't have enough game. You're not smooth enough. You must have said it wrong. You must have did something wrong. All of these different things provide that, to me, what I looked at, I was like, that's rape culture. Like, that's what scared me with my
100%.
daughter, to tell you the honest to God truth. The more I started learning, I was like, I don't know if this is okay. So what services are available because we're not trying to scare people either. We're just talking about the reality of some of the things that don't get talked about enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing I think we should highlight first is that
Okay.
in the description we have phone numbers of therapists that are on call right now.
Thank you.
So if anyone did feel triggered or activated by this conversation, we do have support offered today.
Thank you.
And then YWCA Kalamazoo also has a 24/7 crisis line for outside of this event if people needed support. Do you want to go into more?
Yeah. So we also have a sexual assault nurse examiner program. So that means that anybody who has been assaulted, within 5 days, they can call the crisis line at the YWCA, and they can meet with a forensic nurse and get a kit done. Commonly, they're called the kit, but it's not only just to collect evidence. So that looks like meeting with a nurse. Survivors can bring whoever they want with them. The YWCA provides an emotional support person, and there's so many different reasons to get one of these kits done. A lot of times people might think, oh, well, I'm not going to report it to the police, so it doesn't matter. And it's so much more than that. The emotional support alone is excellent. Nurses provide STI prevention and pregnancy prevention. They assess for any injury, and they're highly specialized and knowledgeable, so they can answer those questions, and then people can be connected to the support. So we also have therapy and advocacy services at the YWCA. So I would say even if someone is maybe like outside of the 5-day window, still call and get connected to somebody if they want that support. Yeah.
They also have a domestic violence and sexual assault shelter and human trafficking shelter.
Thank you. I learned some things about human trafficking and how Kalamazoo County has an alarming rate that's not talked about as much. That was another thing I learned about during COVID that was like, wow, this should be discussed. Not to scare people, not like after 9/11 they had the orange or the red. We don't want it like that. But if we don't have the conversations, people don't know what to look for. If somebody comes and asks for help, how do you know how to help as a community member or to say? So that's a segue for the next question, actually. As a community member, a resident, colleague, teacher, somebody comes to you, how do we not? Because it's not about us believing their stories. That's another thing I had to find out is, it's not about judging what they're saying in that moment, but receiving it, and because that's not my lane, getting out of the way and actually contacting, like the YWCA, being able to pass off that information as opposed to us judging and saying, well, you had on blue jeans, so surely you had. How do we? I know education is one of the ways. I'm gonna go with Oliver first, if that's cool.
Yeah.
Just to ask, what are some of the ways as community we can not cause harm, but not also try to be the experts?
Yeah. So I think if someone shares with you that they are a survivor, just offer belief. Like, you, as a community member, as a colleague, friend, whatever, you have no reason to disbelieve them. It's very rare that people lie about sexual assault. It's like the most, out of all reportable crimes, it's the least lied about. So the chances of them lying to you in that moment is very slim. And even if they are lying to you, it's better to offer them support that they don't need than to take away support that they do need. So I would say always...
Say that again.
It's better to offer support that is not needed than to not offer support that is needed.
Wow. Dope.
Yeah, so always believe them. And then I would say also just offer whatever support is realistic for your situation. So that could be like, hey, I can give you a ride to your nurse's exam. I can give you a ride to see a new therapist. Or it can be like, I can give you some money for a cab or like an Uber. Or can just be like, I can be there for emotional support when you have to go to court. Like, it can look like any number of things. But make sure when you're offering support that it's something that you know you'll be capable of, because it's the worst thing you can do for a survivor is offer them support and then not follow through. Or offer survivor support you can provide, and then follow through on it, and just let them lead the situation, because pushing them to report or pushing them to do anything they're not comfortable with is going to add more stress to the situation.
Thank you for that. You want to
Yeah.
follow up on that?
I agree. I agree with everything. The one thing I was going to say, which you touched on it at the end, is just when someone experiences trauma, especially a trauma like domestic violence or sexual assault, your power's taken away. So you never want to do anything that reinforces that power dynamic. So when you're there as the support person, just allowing, what do you need, letting it be led by them and whatever they need, and not pressuring, because it takes a long, long time for people to process. Yeah. And sometimes even process that they're like they were victimized.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, your realizations about, I think they were talking about rape. But the same can be true for the other side. You can have an experience and then years go by and you're like, I think I was assaulted. So it can take a long time. Yeah.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense, because processing, you don't know what you don't know. So even taking a sexual harassment class that we just had to take a mandatory one of those, a lot of the outreach workers, even within that and learning some of the things that rape is not about sex, but about control and power. And that's why I started deriving some of those things, not just recently, but that was my confirmation. But quite some time ago, just knowing that, hearing that, and knowing, okay, so if it's not about sex and it's about power and it's about submission and these different things, then, wow, okay, well then that's why you drive out to nowhere and, well, I don't know who's gonna drive you home. And I can go down a list of things that I've heard before that's like pressure to get a person to submit and give their body up. And if surely you would feel like years later, I don't know if I should have did that. I know people that have worked at jobs and 5 years later say, I'm glad I'm not there, but I didn't realize it while I was there. So that's interesting that you lifted that up, because I want to transition and ask y'all something. Respectfully. Because I'm not debating the data and that it's the least lied about. That was informative to know. In the black community, for black men, we have feared for years that a woman, specifically a white woman, can say he did something.
And there's
and
historical.
you go.
Yeah, there's historical reason for the black community specifically to be afraid of that. I mean, white women have used that as a crutch to blame black men for.
And do.
Yeah, and still do. Yeah, definitely. So that's definitely an exception to that.
Well, I didn't. So that, again, it wasn't to take away what you said, because I appreciate you saying that. What I wanted to lift up was some of the things that I've learned is when talking with men who are taught by a society that's like, and it's sickening when you go through the layers, honestly, because black men don't have a lot of the same afforded rights and are disproportionately killed, jailed, and a lot of other things. But when it comes to the treatment of women, it doesn't matter. Job, that's one of the things I realized. Job, where you at, society, what territory. We can have the same conversation in Chicago, Detroit, LA. We can go all over the place and just literally just stop, have a conversation, and it's like, wait a minute, that speaks to me. And the more men that hear it, if we could embrace it as opposed to, and that's why I wanted to lift that up. I want to share something with you all. I wondered how to say it, so I won't say any names. But I'm a community advocate, and there's something here in Michigan now called the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, SAKI, S-A-K-I. And when I first heard about it, because I fight against mass incarceration, and because of what I knew historically about black men, I said, oh, we need to have a meeting because this is going to get black men locked up. I was able to attend a trial with a young man that the SAKI, Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, played a part in. I've been knowing him for years. We've shared toxic stories and toxic times together. But I've never thought that, never in a million years, that he would do anything inappropriate. And that's why I wanted to share this, and I waited. I battled back and forth, and I pray that I am not offending anybody, because even though I won't name names, there are some people close to it, if they hear it, may be like, come on, yeah. But I have to say this. I have to own my truth within this, because I would consider this person a friend. So the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative is set up because once upon a time, you could say these things and not be believed, and it just loses steam, and they didn't really know what to do. And DNA didn't allow for a lot then. It does now, and there's different things put into place, including the conversation that we're having today. There's been a lot of new learnings, including that a survivor may not put all of the things together until, or may feel powerless. I sat during a trial, a lengthy trial, and I had to hear from several, because that's how they do it. They go back and they find out if you did this more than once. And I had to hear from several young ladies about a similar pattern. And this young man has a sister that does a lot of great advocacy work, and she was the one that educated me and said, I know you love my brother. I love him too. We cannot re-victimize these young ladies. If they said it, we have to, it's not for me and you to say. And I'm like, yeah, but you know your brother, he got money, and this is me as a community advocate, after knowing some of the things, after already having the truth talks, I believe maybe 2 of them by then, and I still felt like, this is my friend, I've been around him, he's handsome, women like him, he got money, he don't have to do nothing like that. And his sister said, she called me to the side and she, crying, and she said, I know you love him, and I know that that's love speaking. I know it. But you can't be blinded by that. Mm-hmm. Listen to what you're listening to. But first and foremost, not to listen to believe them. Believe them when they say it, because if not, you're re-victimizing automatically. And who are you to say if they're lying or not? It's especially just based off because he wouldn't be a predator to me, is what I was told. I wouldn't see the same. He doesn't want me in that way, so I wouldn't see some of the things displayed that they would have seen. That was so polarizing to me that I felt like I got dirty looks at the trial that was like, why are you sitting over there with him? And I wanted so bad to run over there and say, I just learned, I'm so sorry, your sister just told me. But I wanted to own that by saying this today, that even after I've been learning, when it hit closer to home, and he was sentenced and he's gone now for a long, long time, And I remember the women afterward feeling vindicated and feeling like finally somebody heard me. And his sister looked at me and said, what did I say? And she said, you might still have your doubts when you walk away, but do never, never re-victimize. Never play a part in that. I don't care how much. Don't let love blind you. I didn't mean to take up that much time, but I would have felt remiss if I didn't say that even trying to be conscious, trying to be different, I thought because of the black community, the history, and because of advocacy and mass incarceration, and because I know him, and he, you know, he's popular, and, you know, and because I'm not saying names, I can say this. At the trial, it finally came up, which is why his sister said that. He finally took the stand and admitted to being sexually assaulted. And I was floored, and I was taught how a lot of people will perpetuate some of the things that were done to them as a way of not knowing how to process or to overcompensate because a man sexually assaulted him. So I'm not gay, so I have to go out of my way to prove that what happened to me did not take away my quote-unquote manhood. I just had to leave that here with you all. That's like, that was such an awakening moment for me. That was like, wow.
Yeah, it's really hard to acknowledge that people you care about can be perpetrators.
Yeah.
I mean, and not even necessarily like rape, but probably most of the men that any of us know have at some point like shouted out the window at someone or touched their friend on the arm for a little longer than was appropriate. Like, some of those little things happen to all of us, and they're not always intentional, but it's really hard to admit that either you yourself or someone around you that you care about is hurting someone else in that way. And I think it becomes really easy to slide into disbelief and ignorance to avoid those feelings of, hey, someone I care about or me myself has done something pretty awful to someone else.
Yeah, and I think you saying that was really important too, because you spoke to the way that, and now I'm speaking in generalities, not necessarily about your friend, but the way that sexual predators operate is they groom everybody.
Yeah.
I heard that in there. Groomers.
They fool police. They fool, you know, they might even have a wife or a girlfriend, or, and it's about power, right? So, you know, they might have, and anyone can perpetrate sexual violence, but like they might be loved in the community and very have a lot of money and be very attractive. That's an important thing to lift up.
In the same way, anyone can be a survivor, anyone can be a perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's deep. Thank you, because one of the reasons why I was sharing that story and why I felt like I had to say it is because I literally made a bias. I'm fighting with you, and that's why I was going to court with him, not just to support, but I'm trying to help him fight until finding out. The deeper we're getting, I thank God for his sister and for the fact that she does this type of work, that she was able to call me to the side and check that in like quick. Like, it's not about your love. It's not right now. It's not about your love. You check that at the door. We're not here to hear the facts. None of that, because we're not the judge. And I was like, you know, I didn't want to accept that, because you ride with your people, you know, you ride with your people. And especially if you're an advocate fighting against mass incarceration, I don't want nobody to go to jail. But I could not unhear what I heard. And so I wanted to share that today, because that's been one of the things that, if you put in a historical context, so on my Facebook, Megan Thee Stallion, who's a hip-hop artist, was shot by another hip-hop artist, Tory Lanez. I put on my Facebook, because, again, we've been watching the whole thing play out, And I said, I think it's more to the story than what got said, because it's a lot of witnesses and things like that. And Jakeon got on there and said, and Jakeon will only comment on certain things, just like not all the time. And I'm lifting up Jakeon from YWCA. Got on my post and said, you pretty much similar to the trial, like, if you learn more about domestic violence and how it plays out, you would have never questioned her story from the get-go. And I was like, wow. So do I need to know more? And so I'm asking Jay, do I need to know more? Because from my limited lens and following hip-hop and rap, this seems a little deeper than what got left out there. But what I didn't realize was that the victim blaming, and then domestic violence, and how power is a part of that, because all of those are accompanied. So to me, it's just a learning. I did take it down. It's a learning. But that was me putting that up there and just saying, hey, did y'all see this? And out of the mouth of babes, my youngest son said, you know, everything ain't for Facebook. And I said, yeah, I know that. I said, but this was so polarizing to where you got 50 people saying she's lying and 50 people saying he's lying. And I wanted some type of consensus. And I didn't realize that I was, again, making it seem like as if that's not okay to say for me in my position and on a platform that I have to even question. It ain't none of my business. And if it is, then I should be in the business of finding out how do we not cause more harm on our own and making sure my sons is tight. But that's not how I was looking at it. I was looking at it, like, again, through that historical lens of, we got another rapper on trial for something that he might not did. And it's another black man on trial for all of these things. I wanted to lift those specific things up as I'm still learning. And I believe these conversations are important for awareness. And if I can be in the work and still slip and still, well, this hit too close to home and I love this guy and I don't think he's that. These are all the things, and like his sister said, that was very powerful. You would not see the same, the same traits. I don't mean to scare people and say you got to start looking at people at the side of their head and figuring out what their traits are. But what I am saying is that if there is something that comes up, we cannot victim blame. We cannot erase their truths. That's just what I'm learning. You all are the experts, is what I'm saying. Did that make any sense? Let me ask this first and foremost. Not that I'm asking y'all to judge me, but I have to be for real with this. What if his sister wasn't there? And somebody couldn't tell me that. I don't know if I was that far along. And not with my own trauma of seeing, like with the Emmett Till, they passed that little thing, but the woman who lied, she didn't get in trouble. And that hurts a little bit. And like, I'm not asking for judgment, but what if? Like, what can I do as a person that I ask what can community do? But even if we learn, we can still slip.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you've been really genuine and open and real, and I feel like that's the first step. But also, I wanted to say, when you were talking about the whole Meg Thee Stallion thing, and the one thing at play was, here's another black man who might go to jail. That's another black woman who's not believed. And that's a whole nother thing that's at play, too.
Ain't that a way to look
women
at it?
aren't believed in general, and black
right.
women even more so.
Even more so.
Yeah.
But I think, just being open to those conversations.
Yeah, and I think the other,
Thank
in
you.
the same lens, women of color also face more challenges in reporting. because there's less trust in the police system for the same reasons that men of color don't trust the police.
Right.
But it's going to be a lot more intimidating for like a black woman to go to the police and say, hey, this happened to me, than a white woman, because they're less likely to be believed and taken seriously.
I've also heard about black women not wanting to get black men in trouble. And Megan Thee Stallion said something like that at first, like there's been police killings and things like that. I didn't want him to go to jail initially.
Yeah.
And there's things like that that happen. I don't want him to get in trouble, but I want him to stop
Yeah.
whatever he's doing.
Well, the different, like, if there's a white couple, a white man and woman living together, and there's an issue of domestic violence, calling the police in that situation is not likely to end in anything too violent. But for a black couple in the same situation, very easily one of the two people involved could end up dead. So I think that it is a lot more loaded for people of color in those situations, because there is more societal impacts to sending a black man to jail than a white man.
And Lindsay, you just said not just sending another black man to jail, but not believing another black woman. And first thing comes to mind again, Denim Day. Because they said Megan Thee Stallion was too tall to get overpowered. Or she must have whooped Tory Lanez. That was all on the, like, you can Google that, and it was
All
like,
those
she must have been
stereotypes.
though, again.
Yeah.
So I'm just sitting here listening, and I'm like, wow, and processing. And what you just said, Oliver, that just hit. And then how you shared another black woman not being believed.
Yeah.
That's a lot of things that people said. Well, she's big. She could have whooped him easily, or she could have And
That's
I'm
interesting.
just sitting here just
Yeah.
like, wow, yeah, because he's only like 5 feet something, and she's taller. So a lot of people said she was getting the better of him. And yeah, so I'm just, yeah.
But I think it's important to talk about barriers that people have to reporting or telling others, because there's a lot of barriers that I personally don't have to experience that do come into play when people are dealing with this, especially like those who are undocumented.
Okay.
Who are they going to tell, you know?
Right.
Or people with disabilities. Yeah. The queer community, all of these communities that, one, face more instances of sexual assault. Disabled women are the most likely to be sexually assaulted. It's like 83% of disabled women have been assaulted in their life. And then indigenous women are the second most likely to be assaulted. So
Because they know they can't tell somebody.
yeah, and
It's
both
about power and control.
both of those communities are
it.
restricted by our legal system, because people with disabilities don't even really have marriage equality yet, because disability benefits are limited to single people. Like, a lot of times they get highly reduced or taken away completely when you get married. So like the disabled community is already doesn't have the marriage equality that we're fighting for. But they also like have added challenges in the medical field of like being taken seriously. A lot of times they're viewed as just non-sexual by default. So then that's like a barrier to being believed and taken seriously. And then like women of color are kind of on the opposite end of like they're over-sexualized in media. So then they're not believed because it's believed that their sexuality is like willing and consensual. So there's all these communities are facing the stereotypes of their community, adding even more challenges to the burden of sexual assault.
You know, that's shameful that we live in a society where that you just described straight predators. I'm gonna target the people that will be either less likely believed or would not even take the time to probably report me.
Yeah.
Some of them physically cannot.
That's jarring.
Yeah.
That's
There have
wow.
been instances of like disabled people in comas ending up pregnant, like even though they've been in comas for far too long to have gotten pregnant consensually. There's all kinds of stuff that happens to folks who don't have the power to fight back.
Which I think that's why it's so important to talk about that sexual assault is about power and control. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
So when you have instances where society might question, like, oh, well, they seem like pretty nice, or this person maybe has a mental illness and maybe isn't seen as credible. We have to think like, well, but that's the type of person that someone is going to try to victimize. So just always start by believing. That's my thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, I got one more for y'all then off that one. This is not race. I found out that this transcends all races. That uncle or that cousin, and the family doesn't want to get them in trouble, and so it becomes a family secret.
Mm-hmm.
Not for the person who experienced it though. It's something that they have to live with. Should family be turning in family then? Or should they be trying to get some therapy or something so they don't harm? Or like, what does that look like? I know it shouldn't be swept under the rug.
Yeah, I don't think the solution is always necessarily turning people in, because we've already acknowledged that our legal system is not necessarily effective or where it should be.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think prosecuting perpetrators is going to be the solution for every survivor.
Yeah.
But I think for families who are being approached by survivors, and especially when both the survivor and perpetrator are in the same family or like group of friends or whatever, just offering that belief can be huge, because a lot of times if it's like a mutual family member or acquaintance, it's a lot harder to tell that person because you know that you could be impacting their relationship with the perpetrator. So for a survivor to like risk harming a relationship can add fear to the situation. Yeah, I think the big thing is just circling back to belief. If you believe your family members, offer them support, offer to take them to therapy, whatever needs to happen for them, kind of just let them lead the show. Ask them what they need, because every survivor is different and needs different emotional supports and legal supports or whatever else. So just offer them belief and support and the platform to offer what they need with their own words.
Yeah, families are tricky, and this is hard. This is a hard one for me because I know it's probably nuanced, but sexual assault is pervasive. I mean, it happens very, very often, and in families, I think too often people try to cover it up, and perpetrators need to be held accountable. Yeah. And just full stop. Otherwise, it's going to keep happening. So, whatever that looks like. But I think one of the worst things that sometimes people who disclose to their families that it was another family member are told is like, don't tell anybody, cover it up, we're not going to, and sometimes, and again, this is nuanced, so I don't want anything I say to be taken as like, generalized, but sometimes that can mean that a serial predator is just going to keep on hurting people, because they will. The vast majority of people who rape, who sexually assault, don't do it one time. So if they're not held accountable, if they never take accountability and responsibility, they'll keep doing it. So that's a hard question for me to answer.
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, it would be a situation where you just report as soon as it happens, and advise every survivor to support. But I think with the complications of our legal system and the realities that different identity groups face within that legal system, it becomes a lot more complicated. But I think you can offer that accountability without it necessarily looking like a legal proceeding. So like if your sister or brother tells you that they were sexually assaulted by another family member, maybe that support doesn't look like pressing charges, but just looks like cutting off that perpetrator. So if legal options are not there for that survivor for whatever reason, whether it's emotional or statute of limitations or whatever other legal barriers might be there, if there are barriers to pressing charges, then just offer the emotional accountability.
And I think another important thing to lift up is that when it's children, I mean, the court process can be really traumatizing anyway, but when it's children, I think can be even more sensitive, and it should be survivor-led. Children often think that everything's their fault or they're ruining the family. They're not. The perpetrator's ruining the family for what they did. But yeah, just always respecting what the survivors want.
Should we be talking to more youth? Speaking of that, should this go more into preventative?
Oh yeah.
I think education efforts definitely should be reaching youth because youth are already being abused.
Yeah.
It happens at all ages. So the earlier kids can understand how to communicate boundaries, communicate with trusted adults when their boundaries are violated. I think those educational pieces are valuable as early as kids can start having those kinds of conversations.
And teens about dating, like dating violence and healthy relationships and things like that.
Do you all offer something at the Y that's youth related?
Yeah, so I have a healthy relationships curriculum that
Dope.
I teach. I haven't actually done it yet since I've been in my role, but it's something I am taking over from my predecessor.
Okay.
And I'm going to at least one Kalamazoo school this semester to give the healthy relationships presentation. I also gave it to a college class a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. Dope. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because just hearing what you all are saying, I'm like, I do a lot of mentoring, and I'm like, it sounds like the youth, because especially some of the stories that they tell back that they've already experienced, it's like, wow, somebody should have told you about this. But you don't never know that time either. Is this fixable? Like, this seems like...
This is generational work. So
Okay.
I don't know that the fix is happening in our lifetimes, but I think we move towards it. I think that's all we can do is just see what we want and keep going, and then pass down better infrastructure to the next generation to continue doing even more to get there.
I like that. What?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the same. You could ask the same question about, we talk about misogyny and women's rights. Like, is that, can we ever, or racism? Is this ever gonna, it just feels like a fight.
Yeah.
But we've certainly seen progress. So we know that fighting is worth it.
Definitely worth it. I subscribe to I forget the author's name right now. It's a black man. He said racism it won't die in America. It's being fed all the time. And I believe that. I see it all the time. And it's like, it's more hidden, but it's definitely not going anywhere. This is what we just had a conversation about was, I heard a lot of power and control, but I also heard a lot of not seeing other people necessarily. And that's what I meant by the toxic masculinity. And I can own that as a black man, because it's like, what nerve do I have in a country where I have so many limited rights to be toxic? And it's because we learned the oppressive mentality and how to oppress others. Like, well, and then that's the control thing to me, because it's like, well, I don't have control over my job or school or anything else. Let me go home and cuss my wife out. You see what I'm saying? And it's like those type of things, or cuss the kids out and take it out on them. And if you feel worthless because society is doing you like that as a man, and your only way of gaining back power is to, like, hoot and holler at somebody who's walking down the street, or the first time, I have an older sister, the first time I saw a man get mad because he said, "Hey, baby," and she didn't reply, "F you then, B." I was like, dang, that's like, and I wanted to fight, like, instantly, and I'm like 10 years old. Like, this is the response that you get if you don't. That's, so as long as we have, and that, I know it was a trick question to ask if it's fixable, but as long as we put, like, we take all of the tissue out and we put like 3 marbles in a box and we just keep rolling them around, it's like, when does the momentum stop before you got to dump the marbles out, so to speak? And I'm saying that to say, as long as young men are fed, I won't say young men because society, as long as you are fed that it is okay to victimize somebody else, and you could be predatory in it or grooming in it, getting people introduced to it or targeting people that can't defend themselves, may not be believed if they're told, if they do tell, which sounds very much like a lot of enslaved women being raped, and after slavery still being, and who do I tell? I'm feeling a cultural, like we need to hit a reset button. I'm calling, I'm gonna put him on the spot and say I'm calling Gabriel. That's who I'm gonna call about the camera. Him and I have cameras. Gabriel Jerome is my brother. Was speaking for it. It's my brother, and we do speak it for it. That's what I should say. Speaking for it, we mentor the youth. I'm wondering about what that looks like to take pictures with the denim if we possibly can, or if it's not too late. Just anything to just keep the conversation going. So this is not a one and done, and throughout the years, people can learn different things. I would love to team up when we do things this summer that's coming up, whether it's having a table or if you all don't have the opportunity, you can give us information that we can pass out. This is just something I would like, in addition with racism, mass incarceration, social determinants of health. When I think about the community and what a healthy community looks like, then I feel like my daughter should be able to walk down the street. But then also because she has taught me differently, that I have sons too. And so I don't want them in an uncompromised situation, and also want to be educated enough to say it happens to men. Not just be overprotective as a father with my daughter. So I'm trying to learn. Definitely try to own my truths with you all today, because that's the only way I could help inform the community as a person that's still healing through some of this. And if y'all heard some of the songs that I made, like I said, because some of them I can't even take down. They just up there. I have to heal through some of that type of stuff because I perpetuated a lot of it and just was right there, not thinking I'm causing harm, because I'm thinking there's a group of women that wants to hear this. They want to be talked to like this. They like when you say this. They like this. Not sure where I learned that from, because it wasn't from other women. So that's that part right there. It's like, how do you know if you were only taught by a society that's making bad policies? Everybody has to fight. And as long as we live in a society where everybody has to fight just to be heard or just to be seen, I don't want to follow that direction. So that I've just been kind of anti-system, and this is a part of it. So I hope this was impactful for the community. It was impactful for me. I definitely learned some more things today, and like I would like to do a follow-up. Honestly, I'm gonna be reaching out to you. I know we have that other conversation on the 26th that I'm excited and looking forward to, but I would like to continue this and invite you both back to something. Maybe let's do something public in the Arcus Center or the Douglas Community Center, somewhere in the community, to have one of these same type of conversations and hear from the people. Not to re-victimize, but to hear some of the, because I know I didn't just touch on everything, but I tried to, as far as cisgendered, recovering, toxic male in America, black man in America that has listened to Too Live Crew, Too Short, and everything else. Not blaming the music, but just lifting up the truths that if there's no balance and you're not being told that's music and that's not, it's not okay to actually talk like that, because that can turn into this, and you'll say it at school, which we did. Yeah, I was suspended for saying some things before I even knew what it was in the 6th grade, repeating some things and having to go home and my mother saying, "Do you even know what you said?" I was like, "I don't think so," but it sounded like it's a song. You're like, you can't say that. Now, I'm not going to repeat it. It's foul, but that's how I learned a lot of things. And I'm still learning, like just having this conversation today, like, wow, that's how we do? And the disabled community, that just hurt, and the indigenous. And if that wasn't predatory, I don't know what really is. And the family members, because it's not just that secret, it's a bunch of family secrets that you don't go outside and talk about your family. So if this is the climate of the family, of course this would be included in that. So somebody has to just grow stronger without that family support, without the community support. Do they re-victimize, or do they carry trauma with them in their bodies for the rest of their lives? I got things that I've dealt with the law enforcement that I haven't got over. I haven't.
Yeah.
And it's not about conversations. I can have the conversations, do a lot of things. I just haven't quite reached that all the way to say I'm healed. May not ever get there. I'm not sure. I would hope so. I want to be completely all right, but I don't know if society allows that.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, there's no way to anticipate if your emotions are going to work like that. They're just emotions. They're more fluid than that. You can't predict whether or not they'll heal in the way that you want them to.
Ain't that bad though? Because I wish I could. I
Yeah,
wish I
me
could
too. Me
put them
too.
on this
Right.
on this thing and say, yeah, thank y'all for that. I'm straight.
Have a
On to the
timeline.
next thing. Yeah,
It's a journey.
it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It is. And that's why I feel like this is an important conversation, because we talk about a lot of things in society, and people are a lot more open to talk about things. But it's some things that comes up. Even racism sometimes it bothers people, and it's like, it's like, okay, all right, well, 5 years, we're going to have a conversation again. But it's easier with that, to me, as a black man, to identify this exists, and I'm going to fight back unapologetically, and I can talk about it, and I can post about it, and I'll sing about it, yell about it. I'll wear a T-shirt that says racism is real. But then we flip the script. I want a T-shirt that says sexual assault is real, because it is. And these are the things that, because it's such an anomaly in black and brown communities to not be talked about, just somebody like me wearing a T-shirt like that causes conversation to say, well, why you got that on? Were you sexually assaulted? No, I'm just standing with the people who were, and I believe we need more awareness. So to me, it's just, if we can make the conversation a little more normal.
Yeah, there's power in awareness. There's power in survivors telling their stories so people can feel seen and heard. And
Do you all feel seen and heard? Do you feel like you said what needed to be said today?
Yeah.
Once again, it's not an end-all, say-all, so it's not like, I hope you got it all out, because we'll never talk about this again until next year. It's not like that. Like, I want to follow up, but I know I shared a lot, and I did not want to erase anything that the experts here today were saying.
I feel like it was a good conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think where I'm at personally with my experiences as a survivor, I don't know if I would have wanted to get into it more than that. So I
Yeah.
think being able to touch on it whilst not having it like the focus of the conversation was good.
Mhm.
And I think it was good.
I didn't think we had to go too deep, and that's why I did that on purpose, because
Yeah.
y'all touch such ways that we can really work together as community and get help, and then also speaking to, it's very educational today as far as anybody can be a victim,
Yeah.
and anybody can be a perpetrator. And just that right there that's a door, an eye opener right there, because like I said, I wanted to share the story about a friend of mine because I didn't believe that. There are certain, if you're an entertainer, actor, we make those biases and say, well, not him. He might have did it, this person didn't do that. And I want to get away from that as well. And we can only do that by having some of the real conversations. And it was so dope, Lindsay, that you said the black women have not been believed too. That was so powerful. That was like, wow, yeah. Because historically I said the black men, and that's truth. And Oliver agreed, but the way you came back with that was, so I'm loving the conversation. We went way over, but I really appreciate y'all taking the time to come in. Shouts out to Oliver and Lindsay and the YWCA, Jay Keon, of course.
I just wanted to say one thing,
Yes.
I guess, to speak to anyone who's listening or who watches this that maybe feels like they've been assaulted or experienced something, even if it was years ago. We're here for you. We believe you, you know, at the YWCA, that there are resources out there and that there's a lot of experiences people can have where maybe because of those biases, that blame comes in. Like, oh, well, I started flirting first, you know, or I guess I was wearing, because that stuff gets internalized too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess if anyone is pondering or thinking or having realizations or maybe has never told anyone and wants to, you can reach out to the YWCA.
And one thing we should say about that, all of our services for survivors are free. We don't check, we don't need an address, we don't check citizenship status, and we don't check health insurance. So just eliminating some of those barriers that a lot of people face with getting health care.
Yeah. That was powerful that you both added that. I think that's necessary for the public to know that in case they are listening right now and something may have been triggered that could have happened last year or something. It's like, I don't think I thought about it like that. And this is not, let me make sure I'm very for real in saying, this is not about, similar to what Oliver said, it's not about prosecution as it is accountability. We have to have that to be able to try to make some type of change so we don't continue. Is that what I'm receiving? Like, as a community, as a society, to believe, to not offend, let me say that, to not offend, but then to also support if a person has been offended or assaulted, I mean.
Yeah, I think, prosecution can be really great and helpful for survivors, but it's just not the end-all be-all of support. I also think something that was powerful for me as I've been doing this work is just realizing that support doesn't have to look like much. A 5-minute conversation can be a huge, act of support for someone. So just, even if you don't feel like you have support to offer, 5 minutes of your time can be all the support that someone needs. A ride to the doctor's office can be all the support someone needs. So just even simple acts of support can be game changers.
But like you also said, keeping your word. If that's what you're committed to doing for support, and that's your area that you can carry, actually carrying through, so you're not leaving a person hanging that could really be looking for that support. Just that small, just that ride.
Yeah, I do think that prosecution can be very important, especially in terms of serial predators and.
Okay.
I mean,
so it plays a part.
That's a deeper conversation, but
there's a place for it.
Absolutely.
But I do
absolutely.
have it written down exactly how you said it, which I just kind of smirked when you said it, because I wrote down prosecution, not the end all say all, and you said end all be all, but it was the same thing. I'm receiving some things, but I also have underlined with the family members, and there's just a lot of different things that we got to continue the conversation, and we have to normalize like I said, just as a recovering man, I don't know what that looks like to say you could say this in a show, you can't say this, or you can say this in a song, you can't say this, or you can display this and you can't display that before a person says, now you're starting to trample on me and my rights and how I feel and how I think, and I should have freedom of speech. And it's like, yes, and I feel like if there was more awareness, people wouldn't necessarily say some harmful things. You got to know. You have to know, and you have to know the harm, and then intent versus impact.
Yeah.
So your intention may have been, I thought this was the way to flirt, but being told, you just actually made me feel different, being able to receive that and not be argumentative. Oh, all I did was this. Because then that's the denim day again. To me, it falls under that of my upbringing, my teaching up until the point of violating has taught me I can do this to you. You're telling me I cannot, makes me not receive it, but argue with you and say something must be wrong with you. You're stuck up.
And there are programs, I mean, that's a whole, like, there's different levels. I think you were talking about just sexual, not just sexual harassment, but you were talking about sexual harassment when you get to, you know, sexual assault, more serious, what society deems as more serious crimes. There are programs for offenders out there.
What do you,
That's a whole,
what do you mean? Similar to them getting help? You're saying?
Yeah, like there's different programs that exist, therapy. I know with domestic violence, there's like intimate partner violence intervention programs, batterers intervention programs. When we talk about accountability, people who choose to perpetrate this type of violence, nothing's going to change unless they take full 100% accountability and responsibility and go through those steps. And there's a small percentage of people, statistically speaking, that, like through crime data that exists, that don't ever, and are continue to be dangerous. But
because society allows the platform for that. Like, not.
I'm not a criminology expert, but
Well, that's what I'm receiving. That's like, unless you have to register as an offender, then you don't have the stigma necessarily, and you can go on to reassault.
yeah,
If the mind state is exactly the same, and whatever caused you to want to assault from the get-go. I thought that I can go to the club once upon a time and say and do a lot, especially as an entertainer, until being confronted by a young lady that was like, what if my boyfriend was here? What if my brother was here? Would you do this to your sister? And I was like, oh man, like, it's 2 in the morning. Why are you asking me these questions? I'm sorry, just let me leave. And she was like, no, I want a real answer.
Yeah.
And I talked about that with my wife like years later, and was like, you remember like the club times? She was like, yeah. Did I ever tell you about this? And she was like, that makes sense. Because she knew me during that time, and I'm thankful I was able to receive that. But because that could have went different. She actually could have been there with a boyfriend or something that said, and I wasn't, I won't excuse it. I was inappropriate. I'll just say that. I was inappropriate, so I won't excuse it, try to justify it. So I wasn't this bad. I was bad enough to make her say something to me. So it had to be bad. She had to stand her ground. And I didn't want to hear it at first because it was like, oh man, never mind. I'm sorry. Just, all right, okay, you're not one of the ones. You don't like to play. Okay, let me go. It's like, this wasn't playful. I don't know you like that. You don't know me like that. But it was actually kind. It wasn't cussing me out. It was a learning experience that stuck with me and was like, I guess I shouldn't do that again because that was wrong. And it is one of the things that I have to tell. Like, I've talked to my daughter about that, and she just shook her head and was like, wow, Dad. And I was like, I've had to grow. what I think about that is I won't say fortunate because my father was killed, so that's part of the reason why I was raised by women. But I'll say at least I had and have the opportunity to be called in and checked about different things, and I receive it. But I also wonder if you're in society and just being taught by society and you don't know, because I've said, it's the last time I'm using this term, toxic masculinity to other men, specifically black men. They like, man, there you go again. You in them spaces and you keep coming back with all these different words and stuff. And I'm like, we have to learn these words, because if we don't, I learned from an older lady, and her name is Elder Leslie. She's dope, advocate in Detroit. She said if we don't know what we're fighting, it's similar to like fighting ghosts. And that's a trauma that does something to your mind. When you can't even label what's happening to you, it's hard to articulate it to a person. And of course you don't believe. If you tell me there's something outside, Oliver, right now, there's something outside, Ed, that you can sit down in and you won't have to move your feet, anything, and it'll take you from here to wherever you want to go. But you never tell me it's a car, I don't know what to, you know what I mean? I'm looking at you like, what you talking about, man? I don't know. So we got to look at it like that sometimes, to not be more descriptive, but to be able to have, and I know society places labels on everything, but I'm talking about the real, you said public health crisis. We should know this then. The children, the youth should know that we're dealing with, not to be scared, but to be prepared, to be,
That's good.
Yeah, that's more preventative as opposed to, that's where I'm at with it. We can close out because I'm going, I'm just, the more I'm learning, the more it's like we have to have a conversation about this. And that's why I was so passionate about, you know, just wanting to do this and wanting to meet with you. And we had a dope conversation. I look forward to just continue building. I look forward to the 26th. I definitely recognize you, Lindsay. Once I got my bearings about myself, I was like, we've been in the room. Yeah, so that was so dope. And so dope that you were willing to sit in and actually lean in today. This was like all over the place. Not supposed to be, but I think it worked out very well, and I appreciate you all's time and coming in to talk about such an important topic. And anything you need from me going forward after the 26th, I'm there for the 26th, but even afterwards, like I said, if we could team up and do anything, I would like to help. I don't know how to introduce that to mentoring from the youth, but I think it should be. And if you already have something, then maybe we can do something, one of these summer programs or something like that, so they can learn some things.
Yeah, happy to help.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks
So
for
I'm
having
staying
us.
in contact. Any last words?
It's just thank you. This is a great, honest conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I thank y'all for coming and being so patient, your grace, and your willingness, Oliver, to meet with me prior to today to help me bring this together. To me, this was truly collaborative. It felt great. I'll make sure you got to get your name in too, because Ebony will make sure everything is straight. We'll talk about that offline. But thank y'all very much, and peace, everyone.
I forwarded Ebony's email about the stipend to Lindsay so she
Okay.
can fill out the form.
All right, cool.
Cool.
Yeah, because you get $100.
That's
You know,
nice.
it ain't nothing,
Yeah.
but we value the time of the community that comes in and talks. So definitely want to make sure this was dope.
Yeah, it was.
There are so many different angles. I'm like, oh, we could talk about this for a long
I
time.
know.
So I would like to, now that we're offline, because I didn't know where I was going after a while, I was like, you know, because it just kept building. Because I had a whole, after you and I met, I felt so supported
Uh-huh.
in
Me too.
your conversation and saying, okay, this is this is how we should do it and how I would like to do this from now on. Dominica did. She felt a little different at the end, so she texted me while we were here and was like, I thought I was ready, but I'm not ready. So she
Okay.
just released the book and put it in her book, but
Not ready
it's
to-
her first time.
Yeah.
So her first time publicly was saying something in a small room a couple weeks ago. And she just told me that before writing the book, she had to talk to her grandmother nobody knew.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, Dominique. I was like, so she spent like 17 years locked up. And
Wow.
if she walked in now, I hate to say that because you can't tell somebody's past, but she literally looks too young to have spent that much time in prison. And so when she speaks, she gets a lot of the younger ladies like, wow. And she felt like, I have to say this part. But it blew a lot of our minds that was like, well, I didn't know that was part of. And she said, sadly, it's a part of a lot of young ladies. And that right there was why I asked her to come, but then that anxiety started building. She was like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard.
So it's all good. And I
Yeah.
told her, take your time, it's cool. You know, like, you don't have to do it today because we're going to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, there's always another Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Now, she does GLOW, which is Girls Loving Our Wisdom.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
I've
yeah,
seen that.
okay.
I've heard
Yeah.
of it.
So what I would like to do is they're over there at Urban Alliance. I would like to introduce you all because she talks to a lot of young ladies anyway, and they have a lot of guest speakers. I would like to help coordinate
Yeah.
maybe why going in and presenting
Yeah.
to some of the people that
Yeah.
sound cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I'll connect that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the stat? I think the stat is 1 in 3 females
Yeah. One in
have
three.
experienced sexual assault,
Yeah.
and 1 in 6 men.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's underreported. So
It's like every,
That's what I was just thinking. I was like, if everybody's not telling,
and the
or
number.
not allowed to tell, then the number's a little skewed a little bit. But
exactly.
1 in 3 is still
pretty high.
it is.
Yeah.
It's like every 36 or 40.
68 seconds.
68. So many numbers.
Whoa.
Every 68 seconds, someone in America is assaulted, and every 9 minutes, that
A
person is a
child.
child, which is,
As a victim of assault.
yeah,
Mhm.
every 9 minutes, a child is
Yeah,
assaulted.
I think that their definition for those stats is like unwanted sexual contact.
Yeah, it's not all. like,
Yeah, so it's not
encompassing.
all like,
It doesn't incorporate like harassment and stuff.
I don't think so. No.
That sounds right. I think it's specific. Is it attempted or
I
rape?
think maybe it's attempted rape.
There's some of the statistics I've seen say attempted or completed rape.
Attempted or from rain. Yeah. those
and
stats.
then other ones are like more general sexual assault. So I'm not
Mhm.
sure. But
Anyway, it's high, so talking to youth about it, and especially young women, is a
yeah,
good thing.
Okay. So yeah.
Cool.
Follow up with some emails to connect you all with Dominica.
yeah.
With GLOW, and then we have some summer things coming up. We already had a Blocks Club youth that my youngest son actually handles, and I would like for some of the young men to learn about this from both sides.
Yeah.
So they're
Yeah.
not, last year we did have young ladies in our group too, but it was mostly young men. I'm not sure what the sign up looks like, but I did receive the fact that everybody should hear the information. So who's ever in the group, I'm gonna just make sure I stay in contact.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
I went to your, this might be where we've seen each other, but I went to your talk at Kalamazoo Valley. So it could have been that. I don't know if it was that or not, but it could have been that.
You did, yeah.
Yeah, that was so good.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And then your wife is,
Griffin.
she was on the commission for
Yeah,
a while, right?
former
Yeah.
vice mayor, yes,
Yep.
yeah. That's her.